There's a persuasion tactic that the FBI and the CIA use to get the world's most dangerous people to spill out information without even knowing it. It's so subtle that most people never see it coming. And the craziest part, this tactic is so dangerous that the book I actually got it from got pulled off the shelves. The technique is called elicitation. And you can use this technique in sales, which is what I teach private coaching clients, to get prospects to actually tell you what they're really thinking without them even knowing it. So quick disclaimer before we jump into this, truly, I genuinely am asking you, don't use this to harm people, to manipulate people, to take advantage of people. The only reason I'm sharing this tactic publicly here on YouTube and not in a private setting is simply to teach you how to get prospects to be honest with you so that you can help them. And so let me explain to you how this works. You see, the problem with most amateur sales trainers is they ask us to do what? To ask a lot of questions. Now, there are some questions better than others. However, the problem with most questions is when we ask prospects questions, what happens? They get defensive. Their walls go up. It's because we elicit something called psychological reactance. We ask people questions. They say, it's none of your damn business. I don't owe you anything. Why are you asking me these questions? Sounds like an interrogation more than a conversation. Most salespeople put prospects through like a rectal exam. No wonder why people resist salespeople. So rather than using questions, elicitation uses presumptive language. This gets people to focus on an urge they cannot fight. And that is the urge to correct people. So I'm going to give you some real world examples on how you can use this with prospects in just a second. Let me give you a real world example so you can start to wrap your mind around how powerful this is. And once you get it, you can't unget it. You will totally see things differently on how you communicate with people. So this is a great example of how a ex-military intelligence officer uses to teach this concept to his students. And so just imagine for a second, you walk into a grocery store and the mission, the game is to find out how much the cashier is earning. And so if you think about what most amateur communicators do, if their mission was to find out information from people, to extract information from people, what do? Well, they would just ask some bad questions like, I'm curious, how much do they pay you to work here? And we know if we ask questions like this, like we just talked about, it elicits what? Reactance. People get defensive. Well, why are you asking me that? I'm not telling you how much money I get paid. So instead, you would use this technique and say something like this. It's funny. I was just reading an article that mentioned that all cashiers at Whole Foods just got a raise to $25 an hour. That's got to be pretty nice. And we know we're using presumptive language that is incorrect to force the person to correct us. And so when you use a statement like this, watch how fast that person says, what? I didn't get a raise to $25 an hour. I wish. They're only paying me $16 an hour. And you get that cashier to offer up the information, to give you the truth without ever even having to ask them a question. And here's the psychology as to why this works so well. So the first reason is something called consistency bias. And so humans were driven to do what? To maintain a positive self-image. So once somebody makes an assumption about us that simply isn't correct, we feel compelled to correct them. Number two is something called ego protection. So the brain is hardwired to protect the ego and our status. So when we perceive that someone has underestimated us, we instinctively want to reassert our competence. And then number three is the information gap principle. So in human behavior, all the studies show us that once curiosity is triggered and there's a gap between what someone thinks they know about us and what somebody assumes they know about us, if somebody gets something wrong about us, our brain perceives an urgent information gap. And we rush to close that gap to make sure they're operating with the right information. Number 4 is social norms. So we're hardwired to cooperate and tell the truth in social exchanges. So this is what psychologists call the maxims of conversation. So essentially, it's really simple. When someone says something that simply just is inaccurate, we subconsciously feel the social obligation to help them out, to help correct them. We feel like we're coming to their rescue. And then number 5 is certainly cognitive dissonance. So if someone labels us in a way that doesn't fit our narrative, saying things like, yeah, you probably don't do very well, or you probably don't make very much money, or you don't make very many sales, it creates this psychological discomfort. And the fastest way to resolve that discomfort is to correct the statement and bring the narrative back into reality. All right, so let me give you some actual examples of how you can use this in real conversations with real prospects starting immediately. So when we're talking about prospects' timelines, what we would not want to ask, and what I hope you'd stop asking as a result of this training, are things like, well, how soon do you need to move? How soon do you want to buy a house? How soon do you want to sell? How soon do you have to be there? All those questions do is elicit BS answers. It's because the prospect is protecting themselves from you. That question is loaded with so much perceived bias that the prospects know it, that if they give into this answer, what's going to happen? You're going to jump all over them. So that question leads the prospect to giving you false information. Like, well, we're not in a big rush, or why does that matter? Or why do you need to know that? It brings up their defenses. So what we want to ask instead, well, here's an example. Most people I talk with that have to make a move have tons of repairs that they need to make, which typically takes them months before they can sell. And so that statement gets prospects who don't have repairs to make, that do need to sell quicker. It forces them to correct you and say things, well, yeah, our house is actually in really, really good shape. And as a result, we're ready to sell immediately. And you get them to divulge that information without them ever knowing what is going on. Or here's another example. I'm assuming if it takes a few years to sell, that's probably not a huge deal. You're putting the prospect in a position to do something that they cannot fight, which is to correct you. You get the prospect who actually needs to sell before a couple of years to say, no, I wish, I'd love to stay here, we love it here, but the reality is we need to be in our new place by this time frame, and here's why. See, that's the power of this technique, is it gets prospects to give up information without them even thinking or becoming defensive, so that you're in a better position to help them. All right, well, what about if we look at the example of motivation to sell? So what we don't want to ask are you interested in selling? We know that that is a terrible, terrible question that leads to prospects lying to us or giving us or misleading us because they're scared to tell us the truth. So instead of that, we're going to ask questions like this. Mr. Prospect, like most people I talk with, it wouldn't matter how much your home could sell for. It wouldn't matter how much your home is worth. You probably have the perfect home and you're never moving. And so to the prospect who actually needs to move, it gets them to do this. It gets them to say, well, you know, we do love it here. It is the perfect home. I wish we could stay here, but we can't for these reasons. And they tell you the motivation as to why they want to move. They give you their motivation of, you know what? Listen, we'd love to stay here, but we just need something bigger. We need something smaller. I got a new job, new school, whatever it is around their motivation to sell. You get the prospect to do this unknowingly. This is how you're able to get to the truth. See, when I teach this to clients of mine and real estate agents that I coach and train, they tell me this changes everything for me. I go from having conversations with prospects that, lead me, down all these rabbit holes, and I end up chasing prospects who never end up doing business with me, or people that I find out later really weren't that motivated. And now I'm not only able to get to the truth, but I'm able to uncover information where I can actually get in front of the right prospects right now. Let's look at another example. Reasons for moving. So the prospects' reasons why they want to buy or sell a house. Again, we're not going to ask a question that comes across accusatory like, Mr. Prospect, why are you moving? Like most these amateur sales trainers are asking you to ask. We're not going to ask questions like that. That immediately puts somebody on the defensive. It immediately gets somebody who says, well, dude, that's none of your business, or why is that important? So we're going to communicate and use this very powerful technique that I'm teaching you right now to communicate in a way that gets people to give you the truth without ever being defensive. So you're going to say, listen, most people I talk with that are moving just keep their current home as a rental for cash flow. You can use a simple statement like this that forces people to correct you. Well, we've thought about that, but that's just not an option for us. We actually need to pull the equity out of our home to put down on our next home. Ding, 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 ding. It's so powerful. Let me give you another example. So maybe you're trying to find out, does this person already have an agent? In other words, do I actually have an opportunity here or not? Well, instead of asking a bad question like, well, do you already have a realtor that's going to be helping you when the time is right? Bad question, because it leads to bad answers. A question like that elicits prospects to be defensive. It puts the prospect in a position to say, okay, I need to think about how I answer this question. Maybe I'll just lead them to believe that I do have somebody, and therefore I can get rid of this person. So if they say, well, do I already have an agent? Yeah, we've got somebody in mind. It gets rid of you. And so what do we want? We want the truth. So what would we ask instead? We would say something like this: Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect, I'm sure your agent already showed you the amount of equity that you have in your home unused. What does this do? By using presumptive language, we can get prospects to correct us on purpose. Well, we actually don't have an agent. Okay, isn't that a lot better than asking a question that gets prospects to lie to you? Or another question that I teach agents all the time. I say, Mr. Prospect, like most people I talk to, I'm assuming by this time you've already gone through the process of interviewing some agents and you've hired a really good agent who's going to help you when the time comes. Am I right? And you get the prospect to, on purpose, correct you and say, no, we haven't interviewed anybody, and no, we haven't hired anybody, or no, we haven't gone through that process just yet. This is how you're able to uncover real opportunities, the truth. And if the prospect says, yeah, we've already hired somebody, listen, if somebody wasn't going to do business with you, how soon would you want to know? And so I recently had one of the agents that I'm coaching on the podcast who's really, really good using this technique. And he breaks down exactly what he's doing that's helped him sell over $30 million in real estate at just 22 years old. You can watch that video next right here.